you so much for inviting me to speak with you today, and I'm really honored to be here in person with you all and to be a part of this amazing panel. As Allison mentioned, I am part of the Urban Community Forestry Program at the Forest Service, and actually will be acting as Assistant Director for the program, as our Assistant Director Beatra Wilson will be doing a detail as Associate Deputy Chief for our program. So just a few remarks, and I will turn it over to my colleague Casey to talk a little bit more in detail about the IRA grants. But I don't think I have to go too much in detail with this audience on the importance of trees and green spaces and the difference they make in our urban communities. The strong correlation between access to nature and quality of life, and access to nature and public health is well established. And urban forests play a key role in that. They're 20% of our forests in our country, and the urban trees are critical to increasing climate resilience in our communities. The trees outside our front door and in our parks and playgrounds are some of our hardest working trees, providing us with shade, absorbing air pollution and stormwater, and providing food as well as critical habitat for our wildlife. As we're also too well aware in our urban communities that for the 80% of Americans that live there, to many of them, the trees in their backyard or lining their streets are their most frequent or their only connection to nature and the outdoors. So understanding the importance of urban forests and trees, the Inflation Reduction Act provided the Urban Community Forestry Program with $1.5 billion and a historic opportunity to significantly increase our impact at the local level and improve the quality of life for those most in need of relief. As I'm sure many know, and especially as you mentioned, last year in April, we issued a notice of funding opportunity for up to $1 billion in investments to support urban community forestry programs. And the response was incredible. We received an unprecedented 842 applicants, totaling $6.4 billion in asks. This degree of appeal really underscores the overwhelming need and commitment of our communities to address extreme heat, climate change, and the inequality of tree cover in our communities. Through our processes, we were able to award $1.13 billion to 385 grant proposals, and they came from everywhere. All 50 states, 2 US territories, 3 US affiliated Pacific Islands, and tribes. And it was really amazing for us to be able to reach such a vast number of applicants and from every part of the United States. The priorities that we were especially looking to fund included community engagement in urban forestry planning, extreme heat, tree maintenance, planting and maintenance, and workforce development. But fundamentally, these investments are not just about planting and maintaining trees, right? This funding allows us to strengthen our existing relationships with our partner organizations, with tribes, and with state forestry agencies who are addressing and applying nature-based solutions to improve the health and vibrancy of our communities. But this funding will also allow us to forge new partnerships with residents and frontline organizations that have the best understanding of their community's needs. They have the vision for their future and the knowledge to get the work done, and very crucially, make it sustainable. Another huge focus for us was adding tree cover takes a skilled and knowledgeable workforce. Community trees need to be carefully sited, planted, and maintained. So for us, these investments are crucial to engaging youth and contributing to the workforce development and bringing skilled jobs to communities. Finally, I would like to mention that the Urban Community Forestry Program was one of the first programs to serve under the Justice 40 initiative. This initiative by the White House is ensuring that at least 40% of the overall benefits of federal investments go to communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened by pollution. Through this funding, our program is committed to advancing the Justice 40 initiative, and we have made sure that not just 40%, but all of our investment will directly benefit disadvantaged communities. So every single grant that we made went to disadvantaged communities. Our commitment is to reduce financial and administrative obstacles and barriers that communities face. And we really seek to empower people to grow and care for life-sustaining trees along their streets, in their parks, and their neighborhoods. So with that, I will actually turn to Casey and ask her to talk more about the how we rolled out the funds, what we were looking for in successful applications, and more about the themes and some of the memorable programs proposed in successful applications.
Thank you, Nasheen, and thank you, Nature Forward, for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak on behalf of the U.S. Forest Service. I'll admit this is my first official engagement working for the Forest Service, so it's very exciting to be here with you. And I've probably forgotten the question at this point, but no, the rollout of the Inflation Reduction Act funding happened in kind of two waves. So there were funds available to states, and so states submitted applications, and that resulted in $250 million invested in states. So we do just want to let people know that there is funding available through Inflation Reduction Act at the state level, and some states have already gone through their request for proposals, but there's certainly states that have them out and they're open currently. The second kind of really big wave was the Notice of Funding Opportunity last year in 2023. And we, as Nasheen mentioned, we had this amazing response that really highlighted the need and the demand for increasing urban tree canopy for disadvantaged communities. And so, you know, the review process, we had over 840 applications, I think 842. So we had a very rigorous review process because, of course, we were not able to fund $6.4 billion. We had $1 billion. And so, of course, you have to bring in experts. And so we had a review process for this. Ultimately, we had 385 awards. And there was an interesting structure to it. So there were direct awards, such as my colleagues here who received direct awards. And then we also, for that many applications and projects, you can imagine the Forest Service needed help. So we needed help we needed to increase capacity. And fortunately, there were organizations that stepped up to serve as national pass-through partners. So we kind of refer to them as the Big 12, the national pass-through partners, but we also have other regional pass-through partners as well. And so the national pass-through partners were willing and excited to step up and take on that responsibility to help support cities, municipalities, community-based organizations. And so I would say, the review process, ultimately, some of the most successful proposals that came out really, presented, articulated a distinct need for their communities and identified methodologies to address those needs. Those needs, of course, being tied to the Notice of Funding Opportunities, and then also demonstrated capacity for bringing about those results. And part of that was partnerships as well. And in terms of some themes, so some of the priorities that Nasheen mentioned, and also in addition, of course, tree planting and maintenance was about 90% of the proposals that were funded had tree planting and maintenance. But the maintenance, I think, is also very key because we want to maintain the trees we have and preserve the canopy in those large trees that are providing all those benefits, right? Another theme would be extreme heat. So, extreme heat is the #1 weather-related killer in the US. And it is particularly impacting communities of color, low-income communities that are less able to adapt to have air conditioning to pay for it. So extreme heat was identified by about 40% of the proposals that we're funding. Yeah, no, it's just, and yeah, so do we have any questions? Yeah.
Okay, great. I will move on to Abel and ask him to talk about some of his programs at Defensores de la Cuenca and how funding will help you reach into the communities that the IRA funding that you've received.
Thank you for the question, Yashin, and thank you, Nature Forward, of course, for putting together this event. I love Naturally Latinos and being part of it. I really appreciate the space. And just to go a little off script before I get into it, I would like to ask the Defensores team to stand up. El equipo, por favor, póntese a pie. Give a round of applause. Liz, Araceli, Esme, Val, Lalo, Holly, Pepe, Diana, and Brian, thank you. I could not do this alone, and you are a part of it. I also want to ask our program participants, if you are a current or past program participant, please also stand up. Raquel, Leo, and Febe, I know that you're back there somewhere. Another round of applause. So the funds that we applied for help to perpetuate our goal or purpose, and that's to create capacity at the community level. Defensores de la Cuenca, which means watershed defenders, works to engage Latinos and Spanish speakers in watershed-related issues. We do that by creating opportunities for people to have positive experiences in nature, to create a community, to create a space, to invite people to join us, to create positive memories, to grow understanding of nature and the environment and our impact on it and its impact on us, all with the goal of growing the possibility of participating in our programs. Again, for the purpose of creating more Latino, Latina, and Latina leaders in the green space, because we lack severe representation. The programs that I speak of are La Academia, which is a watershed stewards model type of engagement. It is a paid adult training program that gives a series of workshops, virtual and in person, to grow people's base of knowledge around this theme. They're paid, as I said, up to $4,000 for their time, with the idea at the end of participation or at the end of the program, folks will create a capstone project based on a problem or wanting to resolve a solution in their own communities where they live, thinking about the best way to empower and to implement change where we are. We ask people to think about those things. We don't want to say you have to plant trees or you must do X type of project. It's whatever project is going to keep them engaged and excited about making progress and inviting more people into the space. Each project is supported with up to $3,000 of funds to implement. And in that process, the idea is that folks will identify an issue, come up with a solution, organize around the idea, create a budget, invite partnerships, and then implement, so that there's practice in achieving an outcome for, quite frankly, folks who don't get many opportunities to have paid professional development opportunities. And that's the idea or the frame or the structure that we have. And then the other program that we have is Embajadores de los Árboles, which is tree ambassadors. And it follows basically the same structure, which is what we're going to be using the IRA grant funds to support. That is obviously tree focused. It is a paid adult training opportunity that every participant goes through a training process, a model, and then at the end, they are asked to find spaces for 25 trees to be planted. So most of our community come from highly urbanized areas. Most of our community come from lower income sections of the region and the watershed. And so there's no better representation or better person with the knowledge of where these trees need to go but the community. So preparing people for sharing the information on the importance of trees, and then asking them to go out to their networks and engage people and share the information to find trees or to find places to plant trees is the best way that we can think of to put trees in where they are most needed. Program participants are supported with up to $6,000 in this program because it's a longer period of time. So these funds are going to help us ultimately have long-term funding, a funding stream that will will give us confidence in expanding and inviting more people in, growing our staff, growing our internal structures and capacities. So it's really crucial to our long-term growth.
Great. So speaking a little bit more and going a little bit deeper in the communities of recent immigrants that you engage with, what parts of your program do you see as being the most important to getting people successfully engaged?
I think that the part that is key for us is recognizing barriers to sustained involvement. And that's really recognizing that folks that we work with, we're asking of their time, and that's their most precious commodity. Time away from church, time away from family, time away from work. And knowing that if we're asking for their time, we could possibly be taking food off their table, rent, car payment, gas to get to work. We're asking a significant thing. And so going into these programs and how we develop them, I think the key component is recognizing the value of their time. We all get paid. They should all get paid as well. I view it as their high level consultancy on the success of our outcomes. And we're using trees as obviously our ultimate goal, but they are advising us. We're the staff. Some of us are native Spanish speakers. Some of us were born here. Some of us were born in other countries. We bring with us a lot of cultural understanding and experiences, but we still need to learn. We still need to know who we're working with and where the priorities lie. We have our own experiences and our own background that inform us and inform our decisions consciously or subconsciously. And we only increase and improve our experiences and our programs by involving the community in a very even level. And so having that recognition that their time is valuable, I think is the key component and a key to the success of our work and reflects in our growth.
Yeah, I really like the point that you made is that they're experts in their field as well. Like they know the areas that need assistance. They're bringing something to the table that should be compensated for. And so a lot of times that a lot of the programs have relied on volunteer time, and that we have not recognized the expertise that has been brought to the table in the past. Casey, I would like to turn to you, and you're launching the new Mid-Atlantic Environmental Justice Fund. Can you talk about what you and your partners see as the goals of this project, and where besides IRA are the funds that are coming from?
Hi, everyone. I wanted to say thank you to Nature Forward, too, and to my colleagues on the panel. I really am happy to be up here with all of you. So I'm with the Chesapeake Bay Trust. We're a nonprofit grant-making organization that was established in the 80s by the Maryland State Legislature. We're a nonprofit, but we are supported by the sale of the license plate on cars when people purchase it, and we regrant that money to the public. We also specialize in pooled funding. So while we distribute about $3 million of our own money a year, we also distribute private, corporate, and public dollars, state, local, and federal funding. And we zip together, that's a colloquial term, but we zip together different kinds of money that because different kinds of money has different constraints. Some of you that have had to manage federal money before know some of those constraints. And some of you have had unrestricted dollars, even if you've maybe been the benefit of operational support. Our hope with the Mid-Atlantic Environmental Justice Fund, and I should pause and say, the Chesapeake Bay Trust is just the administrator of this fund. We're not the mind behind the fund. Our partners are the mind behind the fund, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about them as the leads of this funding model. So the Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health, the Centro de Apoyo Familiar, Empower DC, South Baltimore Community Land Trust, the National Wildlife Federation, Sentinels for Eastern Shore Health, the Overbrook Environmental Education Center in Philadelphia. All of these groups have a long history of doing work in the environmental justice space with frontline and fence line communities, and they are the minds behind the Mid-Atlantic Environmental Justice Fund. I just get to sit here and talk about their amazing ideas. And this is a participatory fund. So the people that I just mentioned will engage their networks, and we will resource those folks to help us to design the application process. We will have to ensure that it meets federal regulations, y'all. So that means that it will still feel like a federal application, but we will do our best to streamline it and make it as simple as possible. And the application process will have everybody from these frontline and fence line communities input from the front end. They will also help us to identify reviewers so that they'll help with getting people set up. So I should pause and say each of those partners are going to help people, community-based organizations, frontline and fence line groups that maybe have not found a fiscal sponsor, have not registered for some of the things you need in place to be able to apply for funding, and help them through all those processes so that they're ready by the time the RFP opens. And then they'll help them through the process as well of applying. And because, there's so many groups, to Adele's point, that have power. Dr. Wilson and Dr. Hollis that I've been working directly with on this fund, we call them the directors of the fund on the back end, but they say in power, IN, not EM. So there's acknowledging the power that exists. That's what I feel like Adele was saying. There's already so much power and knowledge among the communities that we want to work with. And so we're not empowering them, we're acknowledging the power that already existed. So in power, IN. And that's the idea of the participatory fund, is that there'll be involvement from the beginning through the selection process all the way till the end. And that communities that have long been marginalized will be centered in not only the design of the fund, but the access to those funds as well. And I'm just very humbled that we get to play an administration role in this partnership. And so the second part of your question was where the other funds will come from. So we have a couple private funders that have already committed some funding to the process. I don't want to, they're small pots of money, but they're way more flexible and can be used for things beyond trees. So I think a lot of folks know that, to do projects in certain communities, they're interested in putting in benches or lighting or murals. And next to those trees. And so we're going to be fundraising for other funding that's a little bit more flexible, that will really get people excited about doing tree planting projects too. And we have a lot of fundraising to do because we have a lot of money thanks to USDA. So we're really very excited about this, but we're going to be establishing what we call a Foundation Advisory Council, and we have a lot of funders that are showing interest in sitting on that council, and we hope that will translate to more money. So,
That's good. So just as a grant maker, what kind of projects do you think will be most successful in applying for these funds? And so any advice you have for potential applicants?
Sure. So, because it's a participatory fund, it hasn't been created yet. We don't even have the award agreement yet. But we will be meeting as a group and as subcommittees to create the application process, highly consistent with USDA's goals, obviously, of planting projects, urban and community forestry projects. But so I can't know for sure about what the application process will look like, because obviously it will be developed as a collaborative of representatives from frontline and fence line communities. But to date, based on the conversations we've had, they want to obviously have all applicants that are successful be based in communities that have experienced injustice in the past. And so the application process will be having criteria that actually rates individuals based on where they are in their proximity to and communities that have experienced injustices in the past. They'll also be prioritizing projects. Again, this is based on conversations we've had so far. This is not written down, that are going to address public health challenges as well. So if there's been urban heat island issues, if there's pollution issues, air quality issues, water quality issues in those communities that are demonstrably from injustices in the past, where trees can actually help to address those issues, those projects will also obviously rise to the top. And partnerships. So there's obviously a strong desire to see authenticity where awardees are directly receiving funds. And obviously, if a fiscal sponsor is necessary, that's fine. But we're hoping to put money into the hands of groups that have maybe not even received federal funding in the past, but that we're going to help them to get to the point where they can accept those dollars. So that's my answer. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I thought we could open it up for audience questions and see if folks had questions for our panel.
Hi there. Good afternoon. This is a question for Kelsey and Chesapeake Bay Trust. The Mid-Atlantic convening with partners, what's your sense of the breakdown with like corporate and family foundations and other institutions in that support, and where there are collaborations on the corporate side?
I'm just going to repeat your question to make sure I answer your question. So you're asking me what the interest in private fund, like the other funders other than the federal funders, like what the types of funders that they are? Okay, good. Right now, there's a group called Agua Fund that's already given us a grant, and we're just holding it until we launch the fund. They're a private funder. We also have, I'll just name them because there's nothing like transparency, right? So the William Penn Foundation is interested in sitting on the Foundation Advisory Council. Robert Wood Johnson is interested in sitting on the Foundation Advisory Council. These are groups, I'm just going to pause and say, these are groups that have not committed an amount of money yet, so they're interested in sitting on the Foundation Advisory Council. One of the other things I wanted to stop and say is that their letters of commitment, when we've written proposals to groups like USDA, and we're working on other federal opportunities to zip more money into the Mid-Atlantic Environmental Justice Fund, we told them that the decision would be made by the representatives of frontlines and fence line communities on whether or not they would be accepted onto the Foundation Advisory Council. Just because they want to give us money doesn't mean that we're going to accept it, because not all money is rooted in equity. So just because of thank you, I will pass along that applause to my colleagues. So just the groups that I'm naming are interested in sitting on the Foundation Advisory Council. Prince Charitable Trust is another group that wrote us a letter of commitment to participate should it be decided that they're accepted onto the council. The trust ourselves, obviously. I'm sorry, I wasn't like I'm trying to tick through them in my head. France Merrick Foundation wrote us a letter of commitment, and I think those are the groups now. We've also had conversations with others that didn't write us letters of commitment, but largely those represent private foundations. We are interested in pursuing corporate opportunities as well, but we'll do that obviously very judiciously because a lot of corporate dollars are also troubling. So I hope I'm answering your question. No. Okay.
While we wait for more questions, I think Casey, we'd also talked about sort of EPA funding as well. There's there is funding through the Inflation Reduction Act and quite a few other agencies that are also ensuring that nature-based solutions and access to green space and access to blue spaces as well is part of the notice of funding opportunity that is coming out. And so we should, sort of think very broadly beyond just the conservation agencies to all the dollars that are coming out through the Inflation Reduction Act to see, where the applications could be successful for access to nature.
I have a question, and this is probably more for USDA, but we're hearing that there's a lot of need for maybe not just tree planting in this work. And so I'm wondering if there was any consideration given to like those co-benefits that come into communities as you were designing this grant program. And I know, most of the money obviously is directed towards tree planting, but it would be great to see that flexibility in some of the funding that's coming through. So what was the consideration behind that as you were thinking through like the grant process and what that would look like?
Sure. Yeah. So, tree planting is kind of the first thing that people comes to mind, right? We need trees as nature-based solutions, but there are other, other benefits to planting trees and maintaining trees, and that would be, the green career paths. So there are definitely a number of proposals and projects that are funded that have workforce development as a focus, and so getting people into green pathways, green careers, paying them to do the work and providing training was definitely something that was definitely a focus. And then also, some cities need more than trees. You need to know where to plant them. You need to know what is the disparity. Where are trees and where are they not, and where are they most needed, and then pair that with extreme heat and other issues, stormwater mitigation. So there are also projects that are just people and cities getting their inventories off the ground or completing them, or backlogs of tree removal. Even that's can be a benefit if you have a hazardous tree, trees that have succumbed to like emerald ash borer. I spoke to a city representative who, their city had like 47% of their trees were ash. So, so there are a lot of other activities that go into this to support increasing urban tree canopy and getting to provide those benefits to disadvantaged communities besides the tree planting.
Hi, Wendy O'Sullivan with the National Park Service Chesapeake office. Had a question. Well, first want to celebrate that trees are counting towards and being funded as part of the infrastructure, big influx of funds that are happening. So hooray for that. But I wanted to ask a question of the full panel about how these dollars, some of these big, influx of funds that are coming in can be part of a movement to really change the American culture to value and fund stewardship. Because as an American culture, we tend to put stewardship in the volunteering bucket versus valuing and funding categories. So I wanted to know sort of your vision. for how some of these funds that are kind of squeaking in as counting towards infrastructure can be part of a change of culture in America.
I can take start at that. I think there are different ways to get at that. I think for us, one way was, two ways were, one, to really emphasize maintenance and, talk about how will you use these dollars to increase workforce development, because you have to maintain this green infrastructure, into the future. We talk about trees helping us to combat extreme heat and to combat stormwater flooding. Those are long-term, this is a long-term solution. Like, trees are not going to do that very soon. And so how do we ensure that the people are there who are going to make sure that we're, stewarding whatever we're putting into the ground for the long term? And that comes through, a lot of it comes through workforce development, but it also comes through education. And so we do, we are looking at, okay, how many of these projects are happening in schools? How many of these projects are happening in faith-based communities, where people, where for kids, we can develop that ethic, and then in other spaces, people have that ethic and we can amplify it and ensure that, it goes to the next generation, and also that what we have funded is sustainable. So,
Yeah, that's a great question. And so one of the ways that this funding will support stewardship, one example is the investment in faith-based groups. So I also wanted to highlight two of the National Pathway Partners, Hispanic Access Foundation and Green Latinos. I'm mentioning that now because the Hispanic Access Foundation came in wanting to, part of their vision is to support faith-based leaders. They have an alliance. They're already doing this work, and so they're supporting faith-based leaders and talking about stewardship and protection of public lands and conserving natural resources, and providing training and then sharing that with their congregants and their faith-based communities. And so that's one way that you're kind of already working in an area where people are thinking about taking care of themselves and taking care of their communities and how to support each other. And so that's kind of an extension of how do you support natural resources that we all depend on.
I'm gonna answer it from a philanthropic perspective, because I think that's probably the best angle, and we can talk about the others more direct. I think that we have an opportunity to encourage and even strongly encourage and design an application process that equitably resources people in the work. And so I'm really looking forward to those conversations with my colleagues and with representatives of communities about how do we design an application process that does just that, right? So that there is, and then it evaluates the proposals with that in mind, right? So that the evaluation criteria centers that equity as well, right? I know that's a short answer, but I think that that's the best answer I can give to your question.
And I think that these funds is a really great opportunity for us to think of things in a more holistic way, so that the idea of trees is related to food security, for example, access to green space. I think that the issue a lot of us organizations run into is thinking about it in terms of climate change and trees, and not taking it a little further to say that is also impacting air quality and water quality, which impacts our health, which impacts educational attainment, which impacts long-term economic opportunities. So when we think about trees, climate, stewardship, I think that we need to impress upon people it's more than that. and impress upon the decision makers, the lawmakers, to understand having a sick populace is far more expensive to maintain in the long haul versus making an investment in green infrastructures on the front end.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Betancourt, and I am a park naturalist with Montgomery Parks at Locust Grove Nature Center. I was wondering if you had some magic answers to a problem that I just keep coming across. So not that many months ago, I actually went and I ran a program at one of the supported low-income housing projects here in the county. And we were supposed to highlight and meet at their pollinator garden, but luckily I went the night before. It was totally overrun by weeds, and surrounding it were kudzu that were 20 feet high. I mean, just in a few weeks in the summer, you can be overrun. I've spoken to people over the nature center who said they've gotten money from Rainscapes and so on from the state and the county, and they've tried to plant those. Those oaks went in. The oaks died the first season. At my kids' school, they did a Three Sisters garden and so on, and there weren't people who were able to, over the summer, water and take care of. At my church, all this excitement about a pollinator garden, but not that sustainability. So the very same extremes in weather, the invasive insects, the overgrowth of invasives and so on that get us planting the trees to address are also such a tremendous stressor on the trees. So do you have some magic solutions that are working for you so that so many of them, people have been talking about like 3/4 of the trees that they get for free do not survive. And then communities, they don't have the sustainability through sufficient volunteers and so on to maintain them and keep them alive.
Sure. I mean, our planning on community spaces, it's a little different. We don't necessarily, we do that, of course, because we do have large tree planting goals, but the Embajadores program is, the tree ambassadors is exactly that. It's the job of the participant is to look after or represent the trees. So they don't have, may not have the space to host the trees. They go into their communities and find spaces. So the tree ambassador's job is to check in on the trees. How's it doing? It's time to water. It's time to mulch. Send me a picture. Maybe we can troubleshoot an issue. So I know that that's different from what you're speaking about, but in thinking about just that issue that we might run into and thinking about, well, what can we do on our part to ensure survivability? That's one of the components of our particular program.
I'll just add to that we've been funding greening work for. Is it not? Oh, thank you. Apologies, everyone. There's a few. Well, I want to pause and say that we've had like a ton of amazing interns over the years that have looked at this problem. This is a problem. Maintenance is a problem. We've had convenings on it, and I think some of the things that we've already discussed on the panel about resourcing people and paying them as though it was a job are obviously very important. And I just wanted to add additionally to that, like some of the other things that we found that are important are to explore different models and try a couple of other like what seem like low-level interventions that actually track very highly with long-term maintenance. So I'll just name a few of them. One of them is obviously like creating. So if the community that or the place that you're working in can champion the planting but not the maintenance plan, that's okay. Just like let's acknowledge that and find another solution. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't all have to be the same people, and we have to kind of accept that and look at other models where we're going to resource people in a workforce model or resource people in a roving model that will support maintenance. If we're working on school grounds, the maintenance crew, a lot of times teachers and PTA, parent teacher associations, are like championing these projects, and it's wonderful. And then they go away for the summer and they're bye, and there's no one around to do any of the work, and the maintenance crew never even knew the planting happened. And so there's models that have to start with the maintenance crew, and have ownership at that point. And then signage is something that we've highly correlated with success long term, as well as passive watering methods, so that there's less regular maintenance, and you're actually like putting it in. I'm turning around just because Belle's behind me and I want to like make eye contact with Belle. But I think that we have to all be realistic with each other about what it takes and what the best approaches are from a time commitment perspective, and actually invest in making the space seem very intentional. I think that we've allowed a lot of plantings that are wonderful plantings, but they don't have if you take a step back and imagine that there was a month where everyone had to go away and not touch it, what would it look like? Would people know that that was an intentional planting? If there's no signage, if there's no other gray infrastructure around it, we've probably designed something that will not sustain, and we need to be realistic about that. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I would just add, when you're making your plans, to make sure that you're choosing, I think you alluded to this, really good stock, really good tree stock, making sure that you're making the right choices for trees that will be set up for success for future climates and can deal with those extreme storms, the urban heat island and exacerbated by climate change. So, and I know that that's a lot to ask of trees, and it's hard because when you whittle that list down, it gets smaller and smaller. But I would definitely look at that, and also soil. So making sure that, you're actually, again, setting the trees up for success underground. They have enough soil. It's amended if it needs to be.
The last thing I would just add to that is when we were looking at designing the IRA grant, one of the things we kept telling everybody who would talk about the grant is that it's tree planting and maintenance. Can't tell you the amount of documents that would come down and say tree planting, and we would say and maintenance, because that, for a long time, tree planting was it. You plant a tree and somehow it will magically, become a tree. And so I think having those maintenance plans for our grantees was extremely important, and having robust plans. But the other big issue that as you pointed out, is, as Casey mentioned, the stock, and having seeds, and the amount of money that's going into restoration through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act means that we might not have the seeds. And so, how do we ensure that the seeds that are out there are healthy enough that we are trying to plant the best and the right trees in the right places? And the hope is that through these dollars, we are also able to take the research and the knowledge that we have collected and disseminate it, so that people are able to do that, and able to do it much more consciously than just, I planted a tree, so I'm happy now.
Nasheen, do we have time for one more question?
Yes.
And also, I can't help but add, please think about deer too.
You stole my comment. I wanted to address not a question so much, but just in terms of, I love the conversation around maintenance. Don't just plop it in the ground. But yeah, one sure way to address whether someone coming along knows if it was an intentional planting or a volunteer, as in volunteer that grows up out of the ground. Deer fencing, deer protection, really crucial to help a young tree survive. So just that, deer fencing doesn't require signing, and deer fencing is very, very easy to make on your own and install.
We have time for one more, but if
Any final questions? Oh, I see one in the back. Hold on.
Hi, I'm Matias Orego with Maryland Environmental Service. I was just wondering if you could speak more to the process of what it would look like for sponsoring community members who would be helping with the maintenance after submitting a proposal. We have a Friends of the Park group in South Baltimore with the Masonville Cove Partnership and Faring Baybrook Park, and we have a lot of members in the community who are just very interested in supporting these kinds of efforts. Thank you.
Sounds like a Casey question.
First off, hi. Thank you for your question. So South Baltimore Community Land Trust is actually quite close to you, and I hope that you. And they're one of the groups of. Well, a lot of our partners are. They have a primary location. They'll be working across a geography to develop further relationships than what they already have. But y'all have somebody right in your backyard that's going to be an environmental justice hub partner that's will be on paid as we've discussed is on the budget to help applicants to apply to the Mid-Atlantic Environmental Justice Fund, and could depending on your interests, that would meet directly with you and some of my team as well to discuss your interests in how to play a role either in direct work in South Baltimore and Brooklyn and Curtis Bay, or in more broadly supporting other work even in South Baltimore kind of splits between North and South Middle Branch, right? But yeah, so depending on your interests, but I think that would be a natural fit to the program, and I'm really happy to hear that. And I should talk to you later because there's a lot of other things happening in your neck of the woods too. So.
Could I just add a closing remark?
Yes.
Thank you. There are going to be more opportunities for applying for funds through CBT, through other federal agencies. And I encourage you all to think about that process. It's not easy, it's long, it's complicated. But if you reach out to organizations that help build capacity, who are interested in environmental justice, they could help you through that process. I think, aside from the pass-through organization, there were two other, I could be wrong, maybe three other organizations that specifically engage Spanish speakers with these funds in the country. That's 3 organizations. How many Spanish speakers are out there in this country? A lot. So we're talking about the most obvious barrier to participation that these funds may not touch folks from our community. So if you know other people who are in this business tangentially, directly, please encourage them to seek these funds out. Again, it's a process, but I think that we need more people applying, and hopefully the agencies will increase access to.
Well, that's a great final and I would encourage people to go online and look at the IRA guidebook and the bipartisan infrastructure law guidebook that has been put out, because they do list all these programs, and they also list which programs are Justice 40 programs. And so there are a lot more opportunities to apply for some of these funds, and a lot more spaces where green infrastructure, trees, green spaces, blue spaces are being added to agency NOFOs that you might never have thought that they would be funding this kind of work before. So. But I'd really like to thank my panelists, and thank you again for inviting us.
Thank you, Nosheen. Thank you, Casey, and Abel. And now I'm going to pass it off to Lydia Lawrence, our Director of Conservation.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you everyone again for working to break down those barriers for our community to get out there. This has been such a powerful and inspiring day